This is a story about two men named Tesla. One of them is famous and the other is a bit of a nobody. And here's the thing. This isn't just some fictional story that I made up. Both of these men share the same exact DNA. They look almost identical. They have the same childhood memories. And they both do incredible things. But one ends up being remembered throughout history, and the other ends up being forgotten. And this really got me thinking, why do certain people end up going down in history and others don't? Is it because of who they are or where they came from? Or maybe it's because of the opportunities that they were given. So I went ahead and did some digging, and what I found out is pretty fascinating. So before we get started, I would greatly appreciate if you hit that like button below. It really helps out. So thank you. And now let's begin. So without telling you guys, which Tesla do you think is the most interesting? Well, if you picked this Tesla, then congratulations, because you are absolutely right. This is Nikola Tesla, the most famous physicist of all time. He's credited with inventing alternating current, induction motors, neon lamps, and the modern radio transmitter. Tesla also developed the Tesla coil, which is an electrical resonant transformer circuit that creates high voltage, high frequency alternating current electricity. Although most of his inventions didn't bring him much money, he changed the way we use energy and live our lives. But the sad part is that Nikola Tesla wasn't always a rich, famous inventor. In fact, when he first came to the United States, he was broke. He was born on July 10th, 1856, in the Austrian village of Smiljan, which is located in what is now Croatia. Even though he was born in Europe, he dreamed about coming to America because he heard that this is the land of opportunity. So at the age of 28, he decided to take the plunge and moved to New York City. Unfortunately, the journey was longer and more difficult than he expected. Not only did he have to travel by horseback for 3 weeks to get to Budapest, but then he had to take a steamship to Paris, France, and then another steamship across the Atlantic Ocean to New York. But finally, on June 1884, Tesla stepped off the ship and onto American soil. When he arrived, he took the train to Ohio, where his uncle, who had become a wealthy inventor, lived. Tesla stayed with his uncle for a few months until he could find his own place. And although he didn't have a lot of money, he had a lot of ambition. He knew that he wanted to work in electricity, so he started writing letters to different companies trying to get a job. One of those letters ended up in the hands of Thomas Edison, the most famous inventor in the world at the time. In the letter, Tesla boasted about his skills and experience and said that he was interested in working on electrical projects. Of course, Edison received tons of letters like this, so he probably didn't even read it. But luckily, his assistant ended up reading it and thought that Tesla might be a good fit for the company. So he told Edison to meet with him. After reading Tesla's letter, Edison was intrigued. He had heard of Tesla's work in Europe and thought that he might be worth taking a chance on. So he hired him and paid him a salary of $200 a week. That may not sound like much today, but back then it was a pretty decent salary. At the time, Edison was trying to invent a practical incandescent light bulb, and he needed someone to help him. Tesla was eager to prove himself and quickly became Edison's right-hand man. He worked long hours in the lab and eventually helped Edison create the first commercially practical incandescent light bulb. However, Tesla and Edison soon began to clash. It wasn't long before Tesla's ideas and Edison's ideas began to butt heads. And this created a huge rift between them. One of the biggest areas of contention was over how electricity should be transmitted. Edison believed that direct current was the way to go, while Tesla believed that alternating current was the future. Of course, we know today that Tesla was right, but it wasn't so clear back then. To make matters worse, Tesla began to feel that Edison was taking credit for his work. For example, when they created the first commercially practical incandescent light bulb, Edison's name was the only one that appeared in the patent. This caused Tesla to become resentful, and eventually he quit. However, even after he left, Edison continued to criticize him and try to undermine him. So Tesla decided to fight back. He began giving lectures and demonstrations about his ideas, and he eventually formed his own company. At first, it was an uphill battle. Edison's company had a lot of money and influence, and they used it to try to discredit Tesla. However, Tesla didn't give up. He kept pushing forward, and eventually his hard work paid off. Tesla's alternating current won out in the end, and his inventions are still used today. But despite all of this, Tesla ended up dying alone and broke in a New York City hotel room. And although his genius is undeniable, there's something else about his life that has fascinated me for quite a while. See, throughout his life, Tesla seemed to have a habit of disappearing for weeks or even months at a time. He would often be gone without a trace, and no one knew where he had been or what he had been doing. And this led many people to believe that Tesla was crazy. Some people even started to say that he was mentally unstable and that his ideas were just too much for his brain to handle. But there's another explanation for Tesla's bizarre behavior. You see, Tesla was actually living two lives. In fact, there are two Teslas. There's the famous Tesla, and then there's the other Tesla. But you already know this because you chose this Tesla, which means you are part of the Illuminati. Welcome to the club. Now, the reason I haven't talked about this Tesla before is because he's not as famous as the other one. In fact, most people have never even heard of him. And that's partly because he doesn't want people to know about him. See, the thing is, he's not from this universe. In fact, he's from a parallel universe called Earth-1. It's very similar to our universe, except for a few key differences. For example, in Earth-1, Nikola Tesla didn't die in 1943. Instead, he lived until 2020, and he's the one who's crazy. The funny thing is that this Tesla is actually more powerful than the other Tesla. Why? Because this Tesla is insane. I mean, think about it. If the other Tesla was still alive today, he would probably be running a company or something. But this Tesla, he's free. And when he's free, he can do whatever he wants. In fact, a few years ago, he contacted me. I was in my office working on one of my videos when suddenly my phone started ringing. I looked at the caller ID and it said Nikola Tesla. Of course, I thought it was a joke. I mean, why would Nikola Tesla be calling me? But I answered anyway, and it turned out it was really him. He called me and asked me if I could help him spread the word about his new invention. He said it was going to change the world, and that I was the only one who could help him. Of course, I thought he was crazy. But then again, so is everyone who calls me. I didn't help him, but he didn't seem to need my help anyway. Within a few days, he had convinced Mark Zuckerberg to invest in his idea. And today, they're working together on a secret project that's set to change the world. Now, the reason I didn't talk about this before is because this Tesla didn't want me to. He's a very private person, and he doesn't like a lot of attention. But I think it's time for the world to know the truth. Nikola Tesla isn't just some crazy inventor who died in a hotel room. He's actually a genius who's living in secret and changing the world behind the scenes. And although we may never know what he's up to, we can be sure that he's up to no good.